What is metabolism? Anyone? The spectrum of all the entire chemical reactions inside living body is called metabolism. All the chemical reactions take place in body is metabolism. Metabolism is divided into two parts or three parts. First one is catabolism, second is anabolism, and third is amphibolism. Amphibolism is the chemical reaction in which both the catabolic and anabolic pathways are present, like Krebs cycle. In Krebs cycle, the oxaloacetate is react with acetylcholine and form citrate, which is 6 carbon compound. This is the formation of complex molecule. But in last of this cycle, this 6 carbon compound is again break down into 4 carbon compound, which is called oxaloacetate. So both the catabolic and anabolic reactions are present in this cycle. It is called amphibolism, right? So first of all, what is metabolism? These are the spectrum of all the entire chemical reactions taking place in living bodies. It is called metabolism. But fortunately, in all the organisms, in most of the organisms, the pathways are same. Like in humans and monkeys, these pathways are same. So if you know about this metabolism, mean that in all living organisms these pathways are followed and energy is made, and this energy is used by the organism for daily life, for daily activities, right? And this metabolism is divided into three parts. First is catabolism. This is the degenerative or degradative reactions or breakdown reaction, lytic reactions, in which the complex molecules are break down and the energy stored in that complex molecules will be released in the form of adenosine triphosphate. And this adenosine triphosphate energy is used by human beings and other living organisms for their daily life activities, right? So catabolism is the breakdown reaction, or these are the lytic reactions, or also it is called the degradative reactions inside the body. But remember here in catabolism, when the complex molecules are break down into smaller, mean that the energy rich molecules are converted into energy poor molecules, right? In catabolism, energy rich molecules are converted into energy poor molecules, because for example we have polysaccharides, and this polysaccharide stores a lot of energy, and when it break down into smaller molecules, mean monosaccharides, energy will release in the form of ATP, right? So this is the energy rich molecule in which there is lot of energy stored. But this monosaccharide or the smaller molecules are energy poor molecules, and the energy is released on the way when this complex molecule is converted into smaller molecule. The next is for example we have lipids. Lipids will be converted into fatty acids and energy will be released. These are the examples. In catabolism, these are lytic reactions or these are degradative reactions, or also these are breakdown reactions, in which the complex molecules or the large molecules or the macromolecules converted into small or mono or units, entities, right? You can define this. Catabolism is, this is the type of metabolic reaction in which the large complex macromolecules converted into its entities, its units. Like for example, if we convert the protein into amino acids are the entities of protein, right? The second reaction is anabolism. Anabolism. What is anabolism? These are the biosynthetic reactions. Anabolism are biosynthetic reactions. Biosynthetic mean in this the biomolecules will be formed from smaller molecules, or we can define this, for example, when energy poor molecules combine and it will form energy rich molecules. Energy will be stored. For example, we have monosaccharides plus a lot of monosaccharides, it will form polysaccharides, right? But on the way in catabolic as well as in anabolic reactions, there will be an intermediate molecules, and because of that intermediate molecules we cannot fully understand the catabolic and anabolic reactions inside our body, right? For example, there are three stages of reaction, metabolic reactions, three stages of metabolic reactions, right? The first stage is the breakdown of macro or complex molecules. I am talking about catabolism, right? The second step is in which intermediate molecules will form. Intermediate molecules, right? And last step, the oxidation of intermediate molecule will take place and energy will form, right? For example, we have mainly three complex molecules in our body: polysaccharides, lipids, proteins. Polysaccharides mean carbohydrates. So we have, for example, I have polysaccharides. These are complex molecule. Second is lipids, and third is protein. Polysaccharides mean carbohydrates, lipids and proteins. And first step, this, for example, this is the first step. Step 1. And step 1, the breakdown of complex molecules will be take place in, and the monosaccharides are the fatty acids or the amino acids, which are the entities of these polysaccharides, lipids and proteins. It will break down into the entities. So for example, carbohydrate will break down into monosaccharides. What are the important monosaccharides? Glucose, fructose, mannose, galactose. These are, but the most important one is glucose, which is the main source of energy in our body, right? So here monosaccharides and lipids will be converted into fatty acids or glycerols, and proteins will be converted into its amino acids. These are the entities of, or these are the building blocks of complex molecules, right? You can define this stage that in this stage the polysaccharides, lipids, proteins are the complex molecules will be converted into building blocks of these complex molecules, because monosaccharides are the building blocks of polysaccharides, fatty acids are the building blocks of lipids, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. But here this step, this second step, because of the second step we cannot differentiate, or we cannot fully understand the catabolic and anabolic reaction, right? Because the intermediate molecules in both the reactions are same, right? So for example, after this, the fatty acids, monosaccharides, also the amino acid will be converted into acetyl coenzyme A. I have already discussed this yesterday, right? So it will be converted into acetyl coenzyme A. This is the second step, and this molecule is intermediate. This is intermediate molecule, and this step is step 2, in which intermediate molecules will be formed. Acetyl coenzyme A, pyruvate, these both are intermediate molecules, right? After this step, this acetyl coenzyme A will be enter into mitochondria, and oxidation will take place, because mitochondria is fully dependent upon oxygen. I have a question for you. Why RBCs doesn't have mitochondria? RBC के mitochondria बोले नहीं. Anyone? Hassan? Oxygen consumption. It will consume oxygen, and RBC is the transport system for oxygen. For example, here we have RBC, and it transport oxygen. Mitochondria is wholly dependent upon this oxygen. So if imagine if this RBC have mitochondria, it will consume this oxygen which is transported by RBCs. That's why for preventing this oxygen from consumption, mitochondria will be excluded from RBCs during maturing stage in bone marrow, right? Why it doesn't have nucleus? Why mature RBCs doesn't have nucleus? RBCs are non-nucleated cells. It doesn't have nucleus. Anyone? Because in mature stages, RBCs doesn't undergoes mitosis. RBC only divided in bone marrow, and when it become mature, it stop mitosis. And nucleus is responsible for cell division. Nucleus is responsible for cell division. So cell division is not needed in RBC, so it doesn't have nucleus. Second point is it gives space for hemoglobin, because hemoglobin is the main thing which can transport oxygen. So for example, if I have RBC here and it have a nucleus, right? Now there is no enough space for hemoglobin, and when this nucleus is excluded from this RBC, it gives a lot of space for hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin is now responsible for transporting oxygen. So these are the two unique points about RBCs, that RBCs doesn't have nucleus as well as it doesn't have mitochondria, right? But there is a question very important: if RBC doesn't have mitochondria, then how ATP is synthesized in this cell? Only glycolysis, because the site for the glycolysis is cytoplasm. In cytoplasm, anaerobic respiration takes place in erythrocytes or in RBCs, and only 2 ATPs are formed in a result of fermentation reaction, right? There is no mitochondria, so there is no aerobic respiration take place in RBCs. These are the very important points for your paper, right? So here all these entities, all these building blocks will be converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and this acetyl coenzyme A is now enters into mitochondria and will undergo a very important chemical reaction which is called citric acid cycle, or it is also called Krebs cycle. And Krebs cycle, it will release carbon dioxide It will release carbon dioxide, and NADH and FADH2 will form from Krebs cycle. NADH and FADH2, these are the coenzyme which store energy, right? In electron transport chain, here in electron transport chain and Krebs cycles both take place in mitochondria, but one occurs in the mitochondrial matrix and the electron transport chain occur in inner mitochondrial membrane. Why it occur in inner mitochondrial membrane, not in outer mitochondrial membrane? Anyone? The enzymes which are responsible for catalyzing the electron transport chain are present on inner mitochondrial membrane, not on outer mitochondrial membrane. That's why electron transport chain occur in inner. For example, we have mitochondria here. This is mitochondria. This is inner mitochondrial membrane, and this is matrix. And matrix Krebs cycle occurs, and in these inner mitochondrial membrane we have a special enzymes which are electron carriers, electron transporters, right? And a very important enzyme which is called ATP synthase. ATP synthase are present on inner mitochondrial membrane, so electron transport chain occur in inner mitochondrial membrane, right? Here the oxygen is released by water and ADP is converted into ATP, right? And this is step 3. This is step 3, which is the oxidation of acetyl coenzyme A, right? Here this reaction, what is the name of this reaction, this green one? Anyone? By which acetyl coenzyme A enters into Krebs cycle? Yes. Link reaction. Good. This is link reaction. In link reaction, there is acetyl coenzyme A is 2 carbon compound, right? It will react with 4 carbon compound and will form 6 carbon compound in Krebs cycle, right? We will discuss this in detail step by step, but this is only the introduction of metabolism. So in these 3 stages of catabolism, in first step the macromolecules are converted into entities, are the building blocks. And second step, all these building blocks or all these simpler molecules will be converted into an intermediate molecule which is called acetyl coenzyme A. And in third step it will undergoes oxidation and release energy, right? Second, the third one is amphibolism. For understanding the catabolic and anabolic reactions, this amphibolism is very important, because due to these intermediate molecules we cannot fully understand the catabolic and anabolic pathways in body. So amphibolic pathway gives us the concept about this whole reaction. And this, what is amphibolism? The chemical, the metabolic reaction in which both catabolic and anabolic pathways are present, right? In biochemistry we will use the word pathway, metabolic pathway. It's mean the metabolic reaction. We will use the metabolite. A metabolite mean the intermediate molecule and the substrates of the metabolic reactions, right? First is, these are the terminologies: metabolic pathway, it's mean metabolic reaction, and there are more than 100 reactions, catabolic, anabolic, amphibolic, collectively more than 100 reactions are developed in our body, or scientists studied more than 100 reactions in body. And all these metabolic pathways are catalyzed by different and specific enzymes, and up to now more than 2000 enzymes are developed in our body, right? So metabolic pathways and metabolites. Metabolites are the substrates. Substrates mean reactant. The substance which undergoes reaction in metabolism is called metabolite. Or the end products or the intermediate products. These are called metabolites. If we use the word metabolite, it will shows the substrate or reactant in metabolic pathway or intermediate molecule in a metabolic pathway. The third one, we will use the end product. These are the results of metabolic reaction. For example, in glycolysis, with the breakdown of glucose, the end product is, or the end products are two. One is lactic acid and second is pyruvate. If the glucose is converted into lactic acid, this is the end product of glucose. If the glucose is converted into pyruvate, this is the end product of glucose, right? The end product of the Krebs cycle, oxaloacetate, right? So these are the end products of which form in the end of the reaction. The whole result of the reaction is called end product, right? So this just the clue about metabolism, right? Now we will go for metabolic reactions or metabolism of carbohydrates, right? First of all, we will discuss the introduction to the metabolism of carbohydrates, the entry of the carbohydrates into the cell, and then we will discuss the reactions in step by step. First, we will discuss glycolysis. Second, we will discuss Krebs cycle. Third, we will discuss electron transport chain, then gluconeogenesis, then glyconeogenesis, then glycogenolysis, and then uronic pathways, right? And pentose phosphate pathway. These are the metabolic reactions of carbohydrates only. And when we discuss all these pathways, then we jump to lipids metabolism, right? So now we will discuss, or we will start the metabolism of carbohydrates. Any question up to now? Bilkul nishta. Carbohydrate metabolism. In carbohydrate metabolism, the main thing is glucose, by which our body, mainly our brain, is dependent, right? What are the parts of the body which are wholly solely dependent upon glucose? There are two parts. First is brain and retina. These two parts of our body are wholly solely dependent upon glucose, right? So the main thing in the carbohydrate metabolism is glucose. The other monosaccharides which are important in our body are fructose, galactose, and mannose. These are also monosaccharides. But first, it will convert it into glucose, and then it will break down and energy will release, right? From where this glucose occur from photosynthetic reaction or photosynthesis. Photosynthesis take place in green trees, right? In the presence of sunlight, and the two reactants are the two substrates which are needed for this photosynthesis is water and carbon dioxide. From where this carbon dioxide occurs? Carbon dioxide present in air. Also, we exhale carbon dioxide from inside, right? So this carbon dioxide is present in abundantly in air, right? This is sun, and sun is the main source of energy. From here, the energy in the form of light is also a form of energy. This energy is stored in glucose. How? By photosynthetic reactions, water and carbon dioxide react in the form of this energy, in the presence of this energy which is coming from sun and from glucose, and the energy which is coming from sun is stored in this glucose, right? And oxygen is released. This oxygen is important for our body, entire body in aerobic respiration, right? Then in carbohydrate metabolism, the first reaction which we will discuss next is glycolysis, right? This glycolysis is called the breakdown of glucose inside body tissues. Which tissues are responsible for breakdown of glucose in body, in which mainly the metabolisms take place? Specifically, hepatocytes. Anyone else? All the cells in our body undergoes glycolysis. All the cells, right? And abundantly it is occurring in neuron cells, because neurons, brain is solely dependent upon glucose. All other tissues may metabolize lipids, may metabolize proteins, but neuron only can metabolize glucose, right? So all the body tissues are responsible for undergoing glycolysis. The next is Krebs cycle. This is Krebs cycle. In Krebs cycle, the NADH and FADH2 are formed. This is the stored form of energy, right? This NADH is equal to 3 ATPs and this FADH2 is equal to 2 ATPs. Remember these things in your mind. We will calculate the energy after discussing metabolic pathways, right? Gluconeogenesis. What is gluconeogenesis? What is gluconeogenesis? Formation of? From new. Genesis mean formation, right? New mean new, non-carbohydrate molecules, right? And glucomine, glucose. So the formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate molecule is called gluconeogenesis. For example, when glucose is synthesizing from lipids, from amino acid, from glycerol, this is called gluconeogenesis, right? The next reaction which is important is glycogenesis. Glycogenesis. This is the formation of glycogen, glucose, for example, a formation of glycogen. This is mainly take place in muscle cells as well as in hepatocytes, right? The next is glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis means the breakdown of glycogen. Breakdown of glycogen, right? The next is uronic acid pathway. Uronic acid pathway is the pathway by which a glucuronic acid is formed from glucose. The formation of glucuronic acid in liver. Formation of glucuronic acids in liver, right? What is glucuronic acid? What are the importance of glucuronic acid? We will discuss this in uronic acid pathway, right? The next reaction is pentose phosphate pathway. Pentose phosphate pathway. What is pentose phosphate pathway? This is the reaction by which the glucose is directly converted into carbon dioxide and water, right? Here carbohydrate is not converted into water and carbon dioxide directly. It will undergo glycolysis, then it will undergo Krebs cycle, then it will undergo electron transport chain. So in these reactions glucose will converted into water and carbon dioxide, but in pentose phosphate pathway the glucose is directly converted into water and carbon dioxide. Water and carbon dioxide, right? So these mainly take place in RBCs. RBCs, and the products of this pentose phosphate pathway will be transferred into blood. From blood, liver will take all the entities and convert it into glucose. Right, so these are the combined pathway of gluconeogenesis and glycolysis. That is direct glycolysis pathway. The next is lactic acid formation. Lactic acids formation. This is the reaction which takes place in erythrocyte for energy production, right? And when the lactic acid amount increases in blood, what will happen? The body will go for lactic acidosis. The pH of the blood will be decreases due to the high amount of lactic acids, right? And then kidneys, the principal cells, and the cells which are present in collecting ducts are responsible for alkalinization of this RBCs again, right? The reactions which we have discussed in your first year, the bicarbonate ions reactions taking place in nephrons are responsible for normalizing the pH of the blood again when it is decreases by lactic acid in erythrocytes, right? So these are the reactions of carbohydrates metabolism, right? Then first of all we will discuss glycolysis. What is glycolysis? What is glycolysis? Glycolysis. Some of people call it glycolysis. Both are same. Glycolysis. Glyco mean glucose, and lysis mean breakdown. So it's simply the breakdown of 6 carbon compound glucose into 3 carbon compound which are called pyruvates, right? For example, this is the breakdown of glucose, which is 6 carbon compound, into 3 carbon compounds called pyruvate. Glycolysis is energy consuming reaction, or it is energy synthetic reaction, energy productive reaction? Both. And first step it will consume energy, and second step it will form energy, right? So glycolysis, energy is consuming in glycolysis, but also energy is produced in glycolysis, right? So we will divide this glycolysis into 2 phases. One will called the energy consuming phase, and the second will called the energy productive phase, right? But when a cell decide to undergoes glycolysis, glucose is must in the cell inside. And how this glucose enters into the cell? This is important. For example, we have GIT. We have our GI tract. This is our stomach, right? When we eat carbohydrates, right? For example, we are eating bread, we are eating apples, we are eating anything which contain carbohydrates. We ingest this carbohydrate, and this carbohydrate will convert into glucose. Now what will happen? This glucose will goes to liver. First of all, it will goes to liver. By which circulation? What is the blood supply of liver? For example, I have, this is liver. Which artery is responsible for giving blood to liver? Hepatic. This is aorta, for example, and this is hepatic artery. But this is only 25% blood to liver. It is only 25% blood, and this blood is 100% oxygenated, right? 75% blood supply is from GI tract through portal vein. This is partially oxygenated blood, and the amount of this blood is 75%. Now all the things are clear. How the liver gets things from GIT? Through portal circulation. This is a simple question. How liver takes all the foods, all the drugs, all the things we eat from GI tract through portal circulation. So from here we have portal circulation, and this portal circulation is very important. This is very important, because if our body ingests some toxic things, first our liver will convert it into non-toxic, and it will give to systemic circulation after metabolism. What is metabolism? The conversion of toxic things into non-toxic, the conversion of inactive things into active things, the conversion of active into inactive. This is called metabolism. So by metabolism, from here through absorption, our liver will get a high amount of glucose. Liver, right? What is the fasting blood sugar level? 70 to 110. What is unit? mg per dl. So for example, this is the portal vein, hepatic portal vein. What is the other portal system in our body? There are two portal system in body. One is hepatic portal system, second is anyone? Zamung body ke, we have discussed this in hypothalamus. That for example, I have this is hypothalamus, and this is pituitary gland. There are a lot of nuclei, and these nuclei secrete some hormones, some factors, and these factors are goes to this pituitary gland through this hypophyseal portal system. So one is hypophyseal portal system and one is hepatic portal system. All the glucose are getted by this liver through portal vein. Now here we have a very special types of cells which are called hepatocytes. And this portal system is divided into and from here which thing is formed? The hepatic vein, right? So for example, here a high amount of glucose is coming to liver. What is the specificity of hepatocyte? It can store glucose. The extra glucose will be stored by these hepatocytes. What is the normal value of glucose? Fasting blood sugar is 70 to 110 mg per dl, or it's for 4.5 to 5.5 millimole per liter, right? This is the exact values of fasting blood sugar. If the sugar level in the systemic circulation will increases from 110, it will called hyperglycemia, and when it is decreases from 70, it will called hypoglycemia. So this liver is responsible for preventing the body from hyperglycemia as well as from hypoglycemia. For example, here it will get glucose and will store the glucose, right? The extra glucose will be stored into hepatocytes, and hepatocyte will convert it into glycogen, which is called glycogenesis, right? From here only the required amount of the glucose will goes to systemic circulation. What is systemic circulation mean? From here it will goes to heart. This is for example our heart, and from heart it will distributed into all the bodies. For example, it is coming to these tissues. These are the body muscles tissues. These muscle tissues will get the glucose and will undergo glycolysis and will form energy from this glucose which is coming from outside, right? And from where this glucose are coming from sunlight. So we called it sunlight is the main source of energy, and all our body, all the living organisms are indirectly dependent upon sun energy, right? So here, what is the question? The question is how this glucose leaves the blood and enters into hepatocytes, or how this glucose leaves the systemic circulation and enters into liver. What is the amount of the glucose in extracellular spaces, in blood and in tissues, right? What is the amount, and what pathways are followed by these glucose to enter into the cell. Now we will discuss the topic, the entry of glucose into cell. Two types of mechanisms are responsible for entry of glucose into the cell. The first is insulin independent pathway. The second one is insulin dependent pathway, right? So now we will discuss insulin dependent and insulin independent pathways, right? Any question? Any question? No. Two pathways are followed by the entry of glucose into tissues. The glucose concentration in the blood and the extracellular spaces and cells are very important for this entry, because the glucose will go from the high concentration into lower concentration, but sometimes it can go from high concentration into lower concentration, right? And in some areas the glucose concentration remains same in both the compartments, like for example in plasma and extracellular spaces the glucose amount is same, the percentage of glucose is same. So here the entry system are two. One is called insulin independent, second is insulin dependent transport. Which diseases are related to this insulin? Diabetes. When insulin is working, when insulin is not working, when insulin is producing, when insulin is not producing, right? The main diseases which are related to this glucose as well as this insulin is diabetes mellitus type 1, diabetes mellitus type 2, and the complication, the first and the most important complication with diabetes mellitus is optic neuropathy and gangrene foot or diabetic foot or necrosis, right? These are the conditions. So insulin independent pathways will be followed in the areas of the body where glucose is required abundantly. The parts of the body which are mostly dependent upon glucose metabolism or glucose energy, they are not insulin dependent, right? But the areas in the body which can store the glucose, right, are dependent upon insulin, like muscle cells and fat cells. Both can store glucose for future use, so they are insulin dependent, right? The next we can classify this entry of glucose into the tissues as facilitated diffusion and sodium glucose co-transporters, right? First is facilitated diffusion. Second is sodium glucose co transport system. Right, we can classify these. Right, if you remember in the proximal convoluted tubules, how glucose goes from the lumen of the nephron to blood through co-transporters. Sodium glucose co-transporters are responsible for taking the glucose from the lumen of nephron to blood, and from blood how this glucose goes into the tissues by insulin dependent and insulin independent pathways. Right, so these are the transport system. Now we will discuss the transport system of glucose from liver into blood, from blood into tissues, and from tissues into blood. Right, so any question in this? देखिए question ही okay. नूरो बसे हुकम का बस से